Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the guest show. I have Lloyd Hope. What's your full name, Lloyd?
It's Lloyd Hobbard-Mitchell.
Hobbard-Mitchell, of the Hobbard-Mitchells of wherever. Anyway, he's coming to talk about a venture that he coordinates, an initiative. I'm actually part of this venture. I think it's a very good venture, but I'm going to let Lloyd talk about it for a bit. Thank you for coming, Lloyd.
No, thank you, Ian. Thank you for having me. Yes, the initiative, the project is called Small Change Revolution, and it's been set up really to highlight, to spotlight the good work that individuals, groups, whether they're registered or not as charities or even social enterprises, do in their community. So there are lots of people doing some really great stuff. And it struck me that what would be useful would be a central place, whether it's YouTube, a central channel, where it highlights those unsung heroes maybe, or that initiative, that work that has high impact and low cost, or just where people are making a difference, where they're creating change, positive change in their neighborhood or their community. And so, yes, I started smallchangerevolution.com, and I started reaching out to people. And that's how we first met, I think, on LinkedIn.
Yeah, you came on my mailing list. And all I saw something. Like, I'm always willing. I saw something you posted. I thought, oh, let's invite them. That's how I get people on the mailing list. Actually, so far I've had nobody say to me, I want to be on the mailing list, which is disappointing. But I'm only beginning. Some companies take 200 years. And I
It's not
thought,
easy. The first step is certainly the hardest, isn't it?
well, it's to keep on going.
Absolutely. Yes.
And not to let things. Okay, there are things that are I can't do. I can't do the bells and whistles. Like this is the first one on video.
Which is a great honor, right? I mean, I think it's a really good idea to let people see what you're doing. I think that the videos will gain hopefully more traction than the audio recordings, right? Um, yeah, I think YouTube's the channel you're the platform you're putting on, right?
Yes, I
Right. And are you also going to be taking the audio version and putting that on Spotify in the same way that you normally do?
think I will be. I'm
Because
not. That's a good.
yeah,
I never thought about that.
so that your audience, you may well end up having two slightly different audiences watching or listening to the same content, and they never the twain shall meet. Maybe those Spotify folks don't ever go to YouTube, and the YouTube folks never really listen to Spotify. So I think it's a really good idea. And so you're one of those people who I'm trying to attract, a fine example of the people who I think create actually small change, which ultimately gains traction and ultimately is able to create quite significant social change or social justice, not just in the neighborhood or the community, but in our country. So although they're the goals, the short-term goals are quite small, I think an aggregate of all of those people telling me what they're up to and how they do it and what successes they've had or what lessons they've learnt, I think that will be a great inspiration for new people who want to do something in their own area.
Yeah, I think that I looked at your site. Okay, it's interesting. I still don't think I'm an activist.
We've got four different categories of people who we're looking to engage with,
Hmm.
and it strikes me that people who are trying to do something, by definition, are activists.
Yeah,
Okay. Now, obviously, beneath that umbrella, you might have a different title which you fulfill. Like, for example, you're going to be on YouTube, and hopefully you get, hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of subscribers. And that means you're going to become an influencer, right? But as far as our four different categories are concerned, you're an activist, right?
as we
Stand ups.
now, I'm going to tell you now, which you don't know. I have been on YouTube in the first incarnation, but then other things happened which I couldn't continue. And also, I do watch these videos how to attract. Like there's one young fellow seeing now he's showing he's even mentioned his site now. Finally, he used to say I get 1 million followers, but he never tell you what his site was.
Right. Okay. I
He
mean, there a lot of these influencers, a lot of these folks on YouTube, as far as I can see, get a lot of subscribers because they're answering questions. How do I get 1 million subscribers? How do I get my first 1,000 subscribers? And that's a format which I think works very well on YouTube, answering questions. Because YouTube, I think, is the second most popular browser that Americans use to answer questions. Now, not just Americans, obviously, if it works in America, it will work in Europe. But we tend to type into Google a question,
mm,
and a video is promoted as a means of answering that question. So we'll watch the video.
there was the other one, Google. You're saying the most popular
Well, Google owns YouTube, so ultimately Google will promote YouTube one way or the other anyway. Yes. So
because Google first came out. If you probably remember it, all they were was about search engine. That was
mm,
it.
of course, and now they're a huge
Everything.
company.
Well, look, the phones,
Yes, there
um,
is.
generic Android phone operating system is managed by Google. They don't own it, although.
No, well, all of these companies, they start as one thing, and they see opportunities, and they improvise and adapt and
But
morph into something else that we need, right? So,
but other companies have disappeared. Yahoo, who was my first email thing, I never went to Hotmail originally. With Hotmail, you got they're around, but they're virtually disappeared.
yes,
So it
yeah.
is about popularity. So going back to small change, that's what this is about. It's not about me, you. It's about the idea. What's your vision for it?
Well, what I see is uh, lots of folks telling us about the good things that they're doing um, by sharing with us either videos up to 1 minute long, shorts, or a video up to 3 minutes long. And I'll be sharing those on the platforms that we're using, which is all of the popular platforms, including as you've already spoken about YouTube. And then beyond that, really trying to find out if we can help those individuals or groups or charities or social enterprises achieve what they want to achieve. So I see Small Change Revolution being an infrastructure organization in the end. In the beginning, it's a bit of this for me. We're in the research stage, right? So I'm researching the third sector at the moment, seeing, there are 168,000 small charities, for example, and lots of those charities will have similar needs. They'll have similar challenges as they grow. Like most organizations, growing from a small entity to a medium entity, actually, there are lots of risks. People might, overreach and find there's a cash flow problem or whatever. Maybe they're faced with I don't know, a regulatory or legal issue. When they're very small and they're just individuals having a go in their local community, maybe those regulations don't really affect them. But as they start employing people, or as they start becoming official and receiving funding, actually they have to comply. And so compliance is a problem for charities which are growing and good causes which are growing. And so I think there are lots of areas where Small Change Revolution will be able to offer support, either peer-to-peer support. So some of our, partners, some of our activists, some of our key supporters or ambassadors will be able to offer supports to other organisations. It may well be that we have contributors on board who are willing to say, oh, I've got a building that we can spare, do you need this, right? So we're looking for, at the moment, 4 different types of partners or stakeholders. We're looking for activists, a bit like you, doing all sorts of different things in their communities. We're looking for contributors, people who are willing to offer expertise or skills or, as I say, even resources such as buildings or whatever. Key supporters, right? So people who are willing to look at strategic backing, right? Going beyond those beyond the contributions made by contributors. And then we're looking for ambassadors. And so they will be the face of the movement, right? It shouldn't just be the likes of me and you. We need folks out and about telling other people about what we potentially might be able to do in the future. So I kind of see it growing, right? I see it being useful. Now, where that's going in the medium to long term, right now, the research is not finished. But I'm in the process of looking at the landscape, the voluntary and community and social enterprise sector, before laying out my stall. Really, it's a new initiative. Started at the beginning of May, so we haven't been around very long.
Yeah, I can relate. When I started the podcast, I was going to hone in on certain sectors, nothing else. Now I see this talking. I can talk about anything, but I've allowed myself that leeway because in the logo it says social issues.
Sure. Yes. I mean, for me personally, what you were talking about earlier on in your podcast was a very natural fit for me. It resonated with me because I'd worked with homeless charities for the first, 15, 16 years of my career. And I've always been involved in work with people in need, one way or another, whether it's homeless folks or people facing, challenges of addiction or mental health, or folks who are ex-offenders or refugees. So, or young people, for example. So yeah, groups of or individuals in need have always been the people I've historically worked with. And so yeah, when I heard your podcast, it made sense to get in touch.
But it is a way because also I see myself as a networker. I'm asked something. You asked me for contacts, and then other people say, "Can I contact that person?" And I think my feeling is just like yourself that although we might be doing slightly different work, we're still doing the same thing.
Of course, it's if there were a Venn diagram, our circles would overlap, right? It's not duplicating. It's very different. So the work that you do, informing everyone about, well, I mean, even the work of Anthony down in Southampton with the Gaia project, very, very interesting, right? Really interesting project, interesting vision and ideas for how to take that forward. When I heard that made an impact on me, thinking, I imagine that lots of people, if we could get lots of folks who are worried about homelessness and the housing crisis to hear what Anthony has been up to, what he's doing, I'm sure that would inspire lots and lots of copycat initiatives up and down the country.
Well, Anthony already is doing something for the third stream. And that
Right.
gentleman, I told Lloyd this before. October is going, the 29th of October will be the first anniversary of the podcast. Now, the realistic thing is that unfortunately, 8 weeks I wasn't well. But I'm still going to use that as the first birthday. And in November, initiative that I did only 2 programs about because it was more in my friend Neil said it's like, it's a documentary style, Real Lives. Now I've got Neil working on mental health, Nicola's working on certain issues that she's interested in, and Nancy wants to talk about hostels and move on. But I will be bringing him back to talk about probably in October, November, talk about what's happening with the Gaia project. Because he's spoken to me a lot about it. I give my own 2 pence. There's areas I don't know about. To people's surprise, there are things that I don't know. But I do know about organizational structures. And the horrible side of it is the paperwork that goes with it, which we all hate. So Anthony's done, I've known Anthony a few years. He's amazing because he's done this for his. When he said to me originally, he came to me with the idea, I don't hear he visualize. He's talked about buildings and all that, and then all of a sudden he sent me, got these 2 houses. We were talking about empty. I was on the phone to him. We were just talking about the empty buildings thing, and he's got 2 houses there. Now there's a chance he could be expanding and looking after more properties in that area.
Oh, it's great. Yes, it's
So
very inspirational.
it is because Anthony, I'm going to repeat his history here. Anthony was homeless at 11, drugs soon after. To 38 was on the streets. So no, let's just say no formal education. And when I brought him on the podcast the first time, we spoke about addiction. He says now he likes doing emails. At that time, he loved doing emails. And those little things that you don't think about that we do naturally. On me, I'm doing about 10, 20 emails a day.
Yes.
But for him, that was it took over the other addiction. It does, but he has done amazingly. I will say this now publicly. He's an amazing man.
Yeah. And I think that there are hundreds or thousands of, Ians and Anthony's and Nicola was another person who was on your show. There are lots of people like that in every community who want to make a difference. And I'm sure that the small change revolution idea, the notion that actually we can just help each other, right? It doesn't, to make a difference, doesn't have to cost a lot of money. So when we're talking to councils or, councillors or, the gatekeepers of funding, actually, there are ways of doing it without costing huge amounts of money. And that's what the voluntary sector is all about. Some things do cost money. Some things do have to be paid for, but actually, I think if you look at the history of lots of very, very successful charities that make huge impacts in our society, they mostly started from very humble beginnings, which don't cost very much money, right? So I think that's where I think, small change revolution can make a big difference with those little groups. As soon as something becomes a medium-sized organization, as soon as it's starting to get hundreds of thousands of pounds a year, then actually they've got the infrastructure themselves to do a lot of the work in-house, whether that's fundraising or volunteer coordinating or whatever, writing their own policies and procedures. But if there are small charities, small groups, or individuals who need help doing all those sorts of things, they're very welcome to get in touch.
Well, you talk about that. I was involved with a theatre company called Cardboard Citizens.
I know them well.
Okay, I went on the one. I was an actor on their hostel tour in 2009. And then 3 years later, I became a members rep. And a few years after that, they asked me to become, it's a awful title in my eyes, the members rep coordinator.
Oh,
I trained the reps how to be reps because what I was told I'm the only one who does the job.
right.
I did it. I read the job description and read between the lines. So I was only doing what the job description did. I wasn't doing it. And for years, I was that. And one thing I did was I created a newsletter. I'm a writer. I've edited newsletters in youth clubs. In St. Mungo's, I did their magazine.
Right.
Magazine is there were a load of stories. So I did a newsletter for Cardboard Citizens. And then they were doing a remake of Kathy Come Home at the Barbican. So I said to one of the directors, what I'd like to do is go around, talk to the audience, get some quotes. That's all. And Ken Loach was there.
Wow.
He should be bloody Prime Minister in my terms, because he was really, we had who I actually interviewed later on, James Murray, who was Deputy Mayor of London at the time. There were two of them for some reason. His job was in charge of housing.
Right.
He came to see the show. It was at City Hall. And I remember he was taken apart by, but I remember going up to people. Now, there's a term I use when I'm looking around for quotes or interviews. Some interviews are rubbish.
Mm.
I call them the blah blah quote. I went up to these women and said, what do you think of the show? Oh, very nice, very nice. And I realized they probably just saw the show and probably thought they're coming. For whatever reason, or a friend of theirs said, or one of them said they go. So I said, you expect a homeless person? Oh, no, no, no. You ever seen one? Oh, yeah, we see them all sitting outside. Well, the reality is just the rough sleepers, not the homeless people. And some of the people that sit outside, a small majority actually drink,
Mm.
you know, are alcoholics or thieves. But that's their perception. But I bumped into when I was doing a social care course, I bumped into my line manager there. And that was a few years. And I said, how you going, Johnny? Great. What do you think of the show? Fantastic. Did you learn anything from it? He says, yeah. I realized one thing I learned from that show is I don't talk to my clients. That simple little thing. There's a scene where Kathy's talking to the registered nurse, and he realized that from that.
Mm.
And I'm a great believer in theatre. If we go back to Alan Bates and the Post Office, that television program really shook the country.
Of course.
But
Yes.
what people didn't know, and I discovered it because I researched it, that in 2015 a documentary had been done about it.
Well, I mean, that story was featured heavily in Private Eye for years, wasn't it? Right. So why? Okay, I mean, it's just the reality. That's what happened. But why it took so long for justice to be served, I'm not sure. I'm not sure why.
It is the effect of, I would say, theatre or film of an actor, and they were good actors in it. You know, and it's great because the writer, whoever it was, did an excellent job. They coalesced, they shrunk the timeline down. So it sounded like everything happened then.
Sure.
Years, but because that's how they could film it. But it affected people more because you started to relate with the characters.
Yes, yes.
And what you're doing with the reason I mention it, in a way, with those short videos. Like, I'm so surprised you want a video of me. We don't like scaring people. All right.
I think you're absolutely right. So I think the use of videos for people to tell their story, especially a short video, so no more than 3 minutes, it really does mean that people have to be concise and compelling, making the points that they want to make as quickly as they can, really getting to the point. And I think in that way, the channel itself that we've got will become really interesting because people will go and have a look, maybe and see something about housing in Southampton, or food banks, or feeding families in Newcastle, or a podcast to do with social issues, and they're jumping from one thing to another. So I think it will in the end be a really interesting and engaging, I suppose, cornucopia of different social work, and not formal social work, just people doers, right? People who are not going to wait for somebody else to fix a problem, and they're not necessarily going to wait to ask and get permission. They're just going to crack on, right? And I think that's, when it's about being positive, and when it's about contributing to a local community or whatever, making it better. I suppose it's like the antithesis, the counterbalance to those people who crack on and do something negative in their community. Those recent rioters, for example. So hopefully we can end up with a very positive bunch of people up and down the country doing all sorts of things, and making real impact, however small, right? However small, it doesn't matter. Knowing that actually it's a bit like a snowball, it can grow.
Now, I have a question for you. I've just an idea. I'm a problem solver. That's what I do. I look at ways of doing things. And I'm willing to offer you my Zoom account.
All right.
I can have up to 100 people on the present thing. Have you ever thought of having a Zoom meeting of all these people?
No, I haven't. We haven't done that yet. It's an interesting idea, and it would almost be like a conference.
Yeah.
Right. We could have literally a conference call. I think at the moment we haven't got, in truth, I don't want to over egg the pudding. I don't want to oversell it.
Certainly.
We haven't got too many people involved just yet, so I'm looking for more people to get involved. But I think when we've got a decent sized cohort, when we've got a decent sized group, then an online conference would be really interesting. I know that, for example, we had a chat earlier about an actual conference, didn't we, with housing justice taking place on the 3rd of October.
Well, it's in October. I can't say what day. I can't remember.
I think it's the 3rd of October. The only reason I'm able to say I think it's the 3rd of October is because, as you mentioned it, I went onto the internet and got my place through the website. So I think we'll be seeing each other there, Ian. But I think, for lots of people, for me, going to London, okay, there's a cost involved, but actually it's really interesting. It's to do with the work that I'm inevitably going to be involved in. So it makes sense for me to be there, right? But for lots of folks, if I say, well, I'm in Canterbury in Kent, lots of people can't get to Canterbury in Kent without paying a lot of money. So an online conference, I think, would be a really good idea. We can have a very clear agenda. We can have breakout rooms and all those sorts of things. It's a good idea, Ian. I'm going to take you up on it, and we can do it in partnership.
Up to 100 is my limit.
Right. Well, we can do it in partnership. I think that's a very good idea to have, even an annual online conference. Let's do it. Let's start talking about it and planning it.
Sure. And there is difficulties of having that sort of thing. I've been to meetings, Zoom meetings. Each page, call this a page, a window, takes 26 people. And I've been to one where there's about 80 people, and it gets confused. Like, there is ways to see who's talking without flashing through the screens, but it is good to hear. And also it's that somebody spoke to me about she has to facilitate meetings. I've facilitated quite a few in my time, not the size. No, there have been big meetings, not 80, but say about 30, 40. And she said, this one person just spoke and spoke and spoke. Said, well, you have to stop it. And that's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, there are ways, there are tools within Zoom to to maintain control, aren't there? And normally, I mean, the conference calls I've been involved in, people tend to mute their microphone, and if they want to speak, they raise their hand, and they're invited to speak, and they turn their microphone on.
Yeah.
So there are some pretty straightforward ground rules that can be sent out to anyone who wants to participate, and if they don't follow the ground rules, then they're asked to leave politely, right?
Well, I've said to her, a gentleman called David Fall's got a great phrase he uses. And I have great admiration. David Fall is the founder of Expertly. And he calls it sliding. Because people just talk. And all of a sudden they start talking about something else. There's nothing to do with the topic, but they want to talk about it. And you have to be very, very careful because a lot of people do it.
Yeah, I think maybe it's human nature, right?
It's human
logic, the way our brains work. You ask me a question about this, and I answer your question before I know it. I am talking about something else. That's well, I suppose that's also how debate works, and that's how ideas are shared.
Yeah, well, I'm storytellers, I'm always telling a story. I try to make it subject specific. Or I refer to it. Today I spoke about something, and actually the guy was interested in another one of my homespun philosophies.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about that, but we were talking about home, and we did.
Yes.
And it's allowing people the permission to say something, but not to. I think the thing in group meetings, and I used to be a group worker in therapy, is people will say something, all of a sudden they'll be quiet. I've been to meetings, for example, I think that's a good example, where I say, I'm not going to talk a lot. I'm a talker. And then all of a sudden there's all this silence. And the question's been put, nobody's answering. I know what I want to say about it, and I'm worried that I'm going to be monopolizing it.
Yes.
And I do talk. And that's the difficult one. I find that very difficult on a personal thing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, look, so everyone has a different personality, don't they? And some people are going to dominate, and other people are going to be a bit more reserved or a bit shy. I suppose it's the role of the person facilitating to draw out some more opinions from those folks who haven't yet spoken, to explain to the people who want to speak a lot that they have been heard. Thank you. Right. And let other people have a chance.
Yeah,
right?
it's
There's
like
a balance.
sometimes I've been to some meetings where there's new people. It's the new people normally are the most quiet. I know when I go to a meeting first time, I'm usually quiet for it's half of it. And it's so one final question.
Okay.
How are you expanding small change?
Well, mostly so far on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is, and as I say that, I recognize that there's a major flaw in that strategy. Okay, so if I'm trying to reach the broadest audience in the what we used to call the voluntary sector, which then became the third sector, which now some people are referring to as the VCSE sector, right? However people want to describe it. If I'm trying to interact with the folks who are active in that landscape, then LinkedIn is quite a good place because there are lots of professionals who work in lots of charities on LinkedIn. There are lots of policy writers and decision makers and fundraisers and, you name it, mentors and all that sort of thing. But the overriding limitation of that approach is how many of those people I'm engaging with on LinkedIn will have a lived experience. And the majority of people, in my experience, with lived experience, don't necessarily join LinkedIn. So I would like, in the end, for Small Change Revolution to be influenced, steered, whatever, one way or whatever language people prefer, but the direction of it, I would like it to be profoundly directed by folks from a lived experience perspective, and in its broadest sense. So I don't just mean, I know I've got a history of working with homeless organisations, but I don't just mean formerly homeless folk. Actually, looking at domestic abuse, looking at JEDI, right, which I learned the other day is a wonderful and a wonderful acronym, and it's got equality, diversity, inclusion, and justice, right? So JEDI. So any of those perspectives, right? I want to make sure that there are folks involved from a whole wide range, because it's only through diversity that we're going to be effective, in my mind.
Oh.
But yes, as I say, so the strategy so far has been LinkedIn. In the future, that will change.
Well, I'll admit to you, my mailing list is mostly, apart from some people I know, and I think that's about 20. Well, it's 153 odd at the moment. Slowly growing, because I contact people and then they say, yes, actually, I've got to. An example is there's a chaplain in one of the Scottish, my friend Errol is doing this prison tour. So I've been approaching people. I've got the head of Scottish prisons on the main list.
Right.
He was on holiday last time I spoke to her 3 weeks ago. But the chaplain actually I got a chaplain in, it must be HMS Perth. She then wrote back to me and said, could we put your podcast on HMS Perth?
That's great.
Amazing. Funny enough, I got in touch with the head of the prison radio.
Okay.
Back to me. And that would happen. I don't expect everybody to be open to what I'm doing. So actually I've got a contact, and I'll do that next week to speak about it. Because on Monday I've got this Monday, oh no, it'll be the past for you, ladies and gentlemen. But on a Monday, I had Lady Val Corbett talking about empowerment of people coming out of prison, and that would interest her. That's definitely an episode that can use.
Yeah, that's going to be very interesting, right? Prison reform.
Yeah,
is a very interesting subject.
So it just happened. I just had to see, and it for me first of all to get them on the mailing list. And I always say to people, listen and decide. I've already got, actually this morning, as the time goes, there was something talking about anxiety. And I've worked with a lot of people in anxiety under therapy way. So I put my 2 pence in what I believe. Doesn't mean I'm right, but it's what I believe. And that's what stand up does. It's not asking, I'm not asked, but I won't take lies like the migrants are getting their hotels paid for, that sort of rubbish. It's got to be real.
I think there is value in dialogue.
Mm.
I think that if I mean, now that you've said about the migrants and hotels, I think that those people who are on opposing sides, you've got intolerant folks on the right
Mm.
who don't particularly want to engage in a grown-up debate, a grown-up conversation. They tend, from what I've seen on the internet, they tend to be a bit racist and a bit prejudiced, so they're not really engaging. On the left, at the same time, there is, in my mind, an equally intolerant liberal left who don't really want to have a conversation with those folks who might disagree with them, right? So the majority of us are in the middle. And I think there's a lot of room for debate and conversation and disagreement, right? Ultimately, it doesn't matter if you and I agree on, whether coffee or tea tastes better. You might drink coffee and I might drink tea, and we can still get on and respect each other, right? And I think that should be, an aim for society about those important issues as
Mm.
well, like, whether it's immigration, whether it's the conversation that's going on anyway in society about gender, right? Whether it's about, sexuality, whether it's about whatever those conversations are, housing, migrants, all of it. There should be space for grown-up conversation where at the end of it, people who don't agree can still shake hands and get on and respect each other. And that's what I think that's what the average community needs to be doing as well. It shouldn't just be on TV at question time. It should be, these are the conversations that should be going on down the pub where people disagree with each other, and that's fine.
Look, I think I mentioned I go to bookies when I got money. There's a bloke there who happens to be the returning officer for Brent. He's one of them. He was actually born in Caribbean, but he lives here now, Ethan. And I will mention the gentleman's name. He likes Nigel Farage.
Okay.
And I said to him, actually, like, Nigel, he speaks for us. He's one of us. He's speaking for the people. I don't think he does. I mean, he's just a clever orator. Yeah. But you can't say, like, actually, I want to say a few things about the amount of money Nigel's getting, which he's saying he's not getting.
Yeah, I read his company. Isn't it his company gets some money?
No. The £1,100,000 which he has to declare as earnings to the Parliament, he's now saying he doesn't get it.
No.
So you can't, but unfortunately, it's his company. So what's he going to take a penny out of it? No. He has a company like that at Lion's Share. At the moment, as we're talking, ladies and gentlemen, I've heard he's in America giving a speech to some far right group where he's going to be paid. Well, the deposit was $12,000. That's the deposit. So we're talking about at least $50,000.
Gosh.
So it's looking at what people do. And I try to present that. But this gentleman I'm talking about in the book, and actually I had another guy, it was the quarterfinals of the Euros. Me and Neil were texting each other because we both like our football. And then we spoke about the game after. And I said, I'm going to go to Asda Saturday night. And I realized by the time I get to Asda, it'll be closed. So I went to the Chinese, which is run by these Asian people. And I'm talking about Indian. And the guy behind there knows about the podcast. And I said to him, yeah, I voted reform. I said, why? Because I do believe that our problems in this country are totally down to the migrants because they're being told. There's no argument. Yeah, I could bring out the facts, but it's educating people, which what I do and I try to do without pushing my own beliefs down people's throats. And if anybody thinks I do, please tell me, because I will apologize. But you're right, there should be dialogue, but there's not.
I think there needs to be, for individuals and communities and society in general to move forward. I think it's a sign of a civilized society to have conversations. Now, whether or not those conversations result in laws changing or, result in anything, doesn't really matter. Actually, what matters is that by people speaking about these things which are potentially taboo subjects, right? There are lots of things which, people are just not talking about, but they might not understand them. And so they want to learn, and maybe their language isn't very good. Maybe they don't know the language to use, right? And so for fear of being not politically correct, they'll say nothing. And then it gets to a point where they say, oh, no one listens to me. I don't have a voice. So I know that's extreme, and I'm certainly not saying in any way, shape, or form that should justify anyone doing what those rioters did or saying any of the things that those particularly racist people said. But I do think that there is room in our society at the moment for a whole host of different issues to be chatted about, right? And if only more people had access to facts, actual, no, not spun statistics, but actual facts, from experts in that field, maybe, without a political axe to grind, then I think we could have some really good grown-up conversations in houses, in the kitchen, over the kitchen table, or down the pub or whatever, and actually, as a society, just move on.
We
Right?
should be able to do that. But when you said that, I just remembered I like LBC. I do a fair amount. James O'Brien definitely doesn't like Farage. His politics is, I would say, a centre. I would say more left. I do like it.
Left, of course, yes.
But he had a caller come up and talk about some of the lies Farage was putting out. And he said, where'd you hear this? Oh, we all know it's true. He said, why don't we fact check it? While he's talking, he's a fact check. It was wrong, but a lot of people do not. I think in this society, and even I made one mistake once, and I had to correct it. We don't fact check.
Yes.
See in the papers. You remember Citizen Kane? I don't know if well,
of course, absolutely, Rosebud. Yes,
Rosebud, but remember, he took over all the newspapers in the country. He wanted to be president. Now, for some reason, he failed. I can't remember why he failed at the time, but he failed. But he knew by having to control the media, he could control people's thoughts.
Of course. Yes, and it's unfortunate that you're right. It's not just the newspapers that people buy because those newspapers they happen to like will reaffirm their own beliefs, but also the social media bubbles that we all exist within. We're making friends with people who are like us, who share our opinions, and in the end, we're only seeing people who reinforce or share our own existing beliefs or prejudices or whatever. And it really does polarize society and communities and even families. I mean, certainly there was a great deal of trouble caused with the Brexit vote, where some families were split down the middle or broken because of it, right? And ultimately, social media was utilized by different parties in that referendum. And influenced a lot of the votes, we know.
Well, it still is, unfortunately.
Of course.
Yes. But people might say, why are we talking about this? This is really about the small change revolution.
It is small change. I mean, certainly, I know what I've said about having a conversation and dialogue, and that's part of small change. Having a conversation is a small change. which can have a dramatic effect on society. I think almost everything we've chatted about, every little rabbit hole we've gone down and explored, I think could be to do with small change, right? I think that's the great thing about it. I want people who are involved in their community, whether it's, as I say, a community garden, whether it's to do with domestic abuse, whether it's to do with immigration, whether it's to do with migrants or homeless people or drug use or mental health or crime and community safety, get involved. Let's do something. So anyone who hears this program, Stand Up Speak Out UK, hopefully they can get onto our website at smallchangerevolution.com and get involved. Do something. Don't wait. Stop waiting. Don't moan about it.
Or
Get on with it.
due to your advice. Okay. Because I must admit, I've only known you, what, a month? Must be.
Yeah, about that. Yes.
I'm very impressed with you. Neil said to me, Neil's my sounding board. And we were talking about, I shared your website with him. He said, this is a good guy.
Great.
And he's a West
Very
Ham.
good to hear.
He's a West Ham supporter. He doesn't know anything.
No one's perfect. We know that, Ian.
So I'm going to say thank you, Lloyd. Thank you for coming. And I'm very honored to be part of your small change revolution.
Well, thank you very much indeed. And we are honored to give you some space on the website, and hopefully people will find you through that. And hopefully we can help you reach an audience which otherwise maybe you might not have reached. Right?
Well, that I had to rewrite part of your thing because I didn't like things you said. But
Of course, any draft, everything changes.
The first paragraph you wrote about the truth. And that's what I truly believe in. And that I'm going to be using it as a press release.
Great.
Because that really show who I am. It does. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was Lloyd. I can't read. Hobbard-Mitchell. Yeah, I got it right. You see, I have a memory for facts, but names really elude me at times. Even though I might meet your person, you know. That was Lloyd Hobbard of Small Change Revolution, which personally, I would say, even if you haven't got an idea at the moment, look at it. Might give you an idea. And if not, what I'll do is in the description below, I will put a link to the website and put Lloyd's email as well. And you can always contact him. He's a very nice guy. And it's funny enough, can't say I've met any. I've only met one or two nasty people in the homeless world and the political world. You won't talk about the one but he is a nice guy. He's very supportive. And all I can say is now, I want small change revolution come the big change in life. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That was the guest show for today. If you want to comment, you can do on the YouTube thing. This is the first YouTube thing. You're seeing me. I know I'm good looking, but don't worry. You can talk to me. But also, make a comment. If you want to contact me, you can email me. It will be down below. And maybe you'd like to join my mailing list. I will have a 2-tier mailing list. Only the first one's been planned, which is the free one. I can't figure out what to do for the paid one. But if you're on the first tier, you will always be notified of each time a show goes up. I call them shows. They're not really a program, I suppose. You'll also get the newsletter from me. That comes out once a month. Next week is I've got to get ready by next Friday, the 30th. That'll be the anniversary for that. And normally I put a lot more into the email than you hear. Yeah. So thank you very much and have a good week.